let's talk about Kuzan, because I think he's one of the most interesting characters in all of Avatar lore, specifically because we do not know much about him. And I really don't fuck with this theory, but I'll get to that in a second. If you don't remember who Kuzan is, he was Aang's friend from the Fire Nation from before he got frozen. Unlike other similar characters like Bumi or Monkey Otso, we never see Kuzan in a flashback. We don't get a sense of Aang's personal relationship to him. That's in the original show. There is a singular comic called Dragon Day or something like that has Kuzan in it, but I would argue that in the original show, the character plays a very significant role in humanizing the Fire Nation. Way back in the pilot episode when Katara explains the Airbender genocide, Aang responds with, "But I have friends in the Fire Nation," which immediately sets a precedent that the Fire Nation is not a monolithic group of bad guys that you would often find in children's media. They are a collective of individuals. An idea that gets doubled down on the first time we hear Kuzan mentioned by name, which is explicitly when Aang is relating him to Zuko, asking that if they had been born at a different time, maybe they could have been friends like he was with Kuzan. And I think that is an important role. I think the idea that Aang knows one of the thousands of just normal people who live in the Fire Nation is important. He's not some great hero. We know he's not the first deserter of the Fire Nation army. He's also not some big bad villain. There are no statues of Kuzan. There are no great stories about him on either side. The odds are he was just a guy who happened to live in the Fire Nation. He lived the best life he could, and then he died. As such, he's a beautiful reminder that there are just normal people living in this country. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in Season 3, where the whole point is differentiating the Fire Lord and the military from the average citizens that are also suffering in the Fire Nation, Aang takes on the name Kuzan. So what was I talking about with this theory? There's a popular fan theory that Kuzan doesn't exist, but it is a fake name used by a young Azulan who would go on to become the Fire Lord. And while that is definitely dramatic and would make for a pretty devastating reveal for Aang, I think it robs the character of a lot of his mystique and significance. Also, the theory was predicated on the idea that the White Lotus were taking Aang around the world to meet future leaders of the four nations without him knowing it, which is why he knows the Prince of Omashu, Bumi, and doesn't seem to know that he is the Prince of Omashu, which is certainly feasible, but also, Aang was a nomad. He was going around the world anyway, and I think he was just making friends because he's Aang. He didn't stop to think about, maybe this guy I'm talking to might be a prince or something. Because he's Aang, and he's more concerned with writing random shit. Seriously, did you guys ever notice, like, every story Aang has from growing up has to do with writing something? Mail carts, penguin seals, giant koi. No wonder he never went to Ba Sing Se. There's nothing to ride there. But back on topic, I do also think this theory robs Aang of some of his airbender roots by making his nomadic nature no longer tied to the airbending culture and instead more Avatar duties. There's always going to be a case where we don't know much about a character, so we assume that he's somehow related to, or secretly is, a character that we do know about. I think we should resist that in this case. If they do ever decide to retcon in that Kuzan did play a role in the show, I think he should be this guy, the old man that Sokka saves in the Jet episode. Because not only does he serve a very similar narrative function, but he immediately trusts and vouches for Sokka, and crucially, Aang never meets him. So that would be my pick.